Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari, and today I want to chat about the 6 books shortlisted for the 2021 Nebula Awards, which the award ceremony for that takes place today. I'm not entirely sure when it's going to be announced, so it may already be announced before this video goes up, or it may be announced later today. It just gives a date on the website, not a time. I am going to tell you the 6 books that are nominated, what they're about, and what I thought about them. So I'm reading them so you don't have to. I did this last year and thought it was really cool because there were a couple of books that I just didn't care for, a couple of books that were okay, and then like a couple of books that were so good and I couldn't decide who the winner was. And then this year it was like 5 mediocre books and one I loved. So let's see where this goes. At the end of this, I'm also going to tell you obviously who I think should win, but I'm also going to say who I think will win. I don't actually know who wins because at the time I'm recording this, the results haven't gone up yet. So let's start. First up is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Now, Piranesi is about a man named Piranesi, and this is told in a series of journal entries from his perspective. Piranesi lives in a house that is just endless amounts of rooms. There's also a sea and a sky inside of his house. The walls of this house are lined with statues, just statues everywhere. None of the statues are the same. Piranesi lives, he exists to explore the house, and the only other person in this house is a person he calls the Other, who visits him twice a week and asks him questions for help for like a research project. Piranesi is a very simple soul, and you can kind of tell from the description that this is a very like whimsical book. It gave me a whole lot of like Greek story vibes, like Greek mythology vibes, even though as far as I'm aware this isn't any sort of retelling. But it has like a labyrinth-esque vibe, and then like the statues feel Grecian to me. So this one, it was one of the ones that is, so this one is obviously one of the ones that is okay. I'm not really into that Grecian vibe. For some reason, Greek mythology just doesn't do anything for me. This is a very slow burn story. There's not really much of a plot. It's just all about like the whimsical. And this one just wasn't a whimsical that I really enjoyed. There's nothing wrong with it, and if you like whimsical stories and you like a Greek mythology vibe, you might really like this. There's a little bit of a mystery in here, and I just think the explanation of what's going on is very limited by the perspective of a character. So if that's something that bothers you, where you don't really get answers, you may not like this at all. So okay, but nothing great about it. So next up is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This one has another interesting premise, and it's also kind of whimsical. Basically, great cities come alive, and these cities have avatars. And New York is unique because of its borough. So you have an avatar of New York and then avatars of the boroughs of New York. And so instead of just having one soul for the city, you have 6 souls for the city, or 5 like lesser souls and 1 really big soul. There's also these like creatures, evil being things that don't want cities to come alive, and they're trying to sabotage this, they're trying to sabotage the birth of New York. Now, this story is probably really great for people who love New York. if New York is your thing, you love everything about the city, maybe you grew up there or always wanted to go there, this is probably like a really great story for you. For me, because I don't care about New York, it was flat to me. All of the characters who represented the boroughs had very two-dimensional personalities because one person had to represent an entire community of people, so there wasn't the ability to create a lot of depth in their character. It was just like the overall feel of the community crushed into one character. So wasn't great. What this book does do great is handle like racism and poverty and hate crimes and stuff like that. So like the conversations had in this book about prejudices in a huge city of like New York with such a vast array of demographics of people is really, really interesting. And that part of the story was good, but it wasn't enough of the story for me to give this anything more than a 3-star. So recommend this one for people who really, really like New York, but if you don't care about New York, I have a feeling that you probably won't like this book. Next up is Mexican Gothic, which takes place in Mexico in the 1920s, I want to say. A young girl, Naomi, I believe is her name, gets a frantic letter from her cousin, her newlywed cousin, who says her husband and his family is trying to kill me. Please come, I need your help. Naomi decides to go visit her cousin and see like what's going on. And her cousin has married into this very English family in the countryside of Mexico. They're very bigoted and racist. They refuse to speak Spanish or even learn Spanish for the most part. And then they treat all of the darker skinned Hispanic people around them as like servants or slaves. And weird shit happens. And you go through the book being like, this is weird, what's going on? Is this being imagined or is this really happening? And it's horror-ish, focuses a lot on body horror, I would say. For me, I knew going into reading this book that I do not like Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing. So this already probably wasn't going to do well in my opinion, but it seems like a lot of people do like this. I thought the plot of the story was fairly interesting. A lot of the bigotry and stuff didn't make sense because this family is very poor, even though they're like poor nobility class, but they have no power really to back the bigotry that they show. And it just felt kind of like flat to me as far as like that goes, because to me, one of the biggest aspects of racism is a power imbalance. And there was no power imbalance in this situation because this family has absolutely zero power. They're just like racist imbeciles who live in the country and are missing teeth because they're so inbred. So that aspect of it didn't wow me. The horror, for the most part, I thought was kind of interesting. I did mention that this is mostly body horror, so if you're squeamish about that, it may not be for you. I don't think my review is probably the best place to go for Silvia Moreno Garcia's books because I just don't like her writing style. So I'm gonna do my best to avoid her books in the future, but she keeps getting nominated for awards. So I'm probably going to be stuck reading more of them that I find bad to mediocre. So next up is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This story is, this story takes place in like a fantasy Victorian era type place where certain people are born with the ability to use magic. And this is a very sorcery type magic where their magic becomes more powerful when they are possessed almost by like a spirit. So it's not really full possession, it's more like a familiar situation, but the spirit lives inside of you and that spirit helps your power become stronger and stronger and stronger depending on what the spirit is and like the level of the spirit and then your own like base power and everything like that. So in this universe, although men and women can use magical abilities, if a woman is pregnant and uses magic, her infant will be fully possessed by one of these magical beings and it will be born basically evil, not truly evil, but have like no impulse control. So a small child will like burn down an entire city because they like the color of fire if they're one of these possessed children. So in this society, how they deal with that is every woman, from the moment she becomes married until she goes through menopause, she is forced to wear a collar that restricts her from creating magic. And then after she goes through menopause and can't have children anymore, then if she wants to learn magic or do magic on her own, whatever, but she will never have the power of a man. So this book is mostly about misogyny and this huge misogynistic community where women have no choice, like their only purpose is to have children. They don't even have the option of never getting married. They have to be married. And once they are married, they are restricted and unable to use the magic they were born with. So this one, the story wasn't bad, but having to deal with misogyny every single day, I don't want to read a book that's like 80% misogyny just to get to woman power at the very end of it. And I get the point of this. Like, the point of this book is not the misogynistic universe. It's like that women can overcome misogyny. It's just that's not something I'm interested in reading in, because I see reading is mostly escapism, and I'm not escaping anything by reading about endless misogyny because I deal with endless misogyny. So if that's not something that bothers you, I don't think this is a bad book at all. And it is a very interesting take on feminism and women overcoming like shitty things. The only real problem I had was like the wishy-washiness of the main character, where like one moment she'll be like, I never want to get married and I am going to escape this life and become a sorceress, and then like 2 paragraphs later, I'm in love with him. I want to marry him right now. And then it's just back and forth and back and forth, and she can never really seem to make up her mind. Also, this is like a very insta-love situation where she meets this guy and almost instantly falls in love with him after like a couple of chapters of, I have no interest in men, I'm never going to get married, I just want to be on my own because magic is the most important thing to me. And then instantly seeing this man and being like, I'm in love with him. Bullshit like that just annoys me, because I am a bitter old spinster, I guess. So if that kind of trope bothers you, you might want to avoid this one too. So the next book is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and this book is inspired by pre-Columbian civilizations in North America and follows some like really interesting characters. There's like prophecies, there's political intrigue, there's magic. you're following different characters from different walks in life and like all these different aspects of like how this prophecy is supposed to play out. And I think it's supposed to be a prophecy of the end of the world, but it's the god, or a god will return to this land when the earth and sky converge, I believe is the prophecy. So the premise sounded really interesting, and there were parts of this book that were really interesting. The rep in this book is fantastic, particularly speaking towards the LGBTQIA plus rep. There is trans rep in here, there is non-binary rep, and that's not something that you see a whole lot in books, so I really, really appreciate this fantasy book for those aspects. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I think that's where I went wrong, because I keep hearing people like rant and rave about how great this book is, but I didn't get that. I was kind of like bored throughout most of it. There would be like instances where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But maybe like 2 or 3 days after the book after I finished reading the book, I pretty much forgot what the book was about. And I have a very, very vague recollection of it. So I am going to say that this book is probably better than I make it seem, and it's my fault for reading this as an audiobook instead of getting a physical copy. And eventually, probably once book 2 comes out, I'm gonna try to reread this and see if it was just the audiobook or if this book just really isn't for me for some reason. But I definitely recommend other reviews other than mine for this one. And the final book, the only book that I gave 5 stars. All the other ones were 3 stars if I didn't mention that earlier. And that is Network Effect by Martha Wells. This is book 5 in the Murderbot Diaries, and I adore Murderbot. Now, books 1 through 4 and book 6 in the Murderbot Diaries are all novellas. This is the only full-length novel in the series so far. I don't know if there's plans to be more, but out of the 6 books that exist in the series, this is the only full-length novel. This one's a little bit harder to talk about because it is the 5th book in a series, but this contains like an amalgamation of characters that we're introduced to in like the different novellas that all come together and go on an adventure. This contains 2 of my favorite characters from the series, which is Murderbot themselves and Art. Now, Murderbot is a human-machine hybrid. Murderbot is like a mass-produced human-machine hybrid that has like overrode its own governor system in its brain, and it has a personality. It can think for itself, and it really wants to do absolutely nothing except for watch soap operas all the time. Murderbot is very antisocial and hates being around people. But Murderbot is also very, very protective of very specific people in its life. Murderbot is also very sarcastic, and Murderbot is not human really in any way. Its human parts were grown in a lab. It was never like a human that was augmented to be a robot. It was created as a robot and has like human bits attached to it. Now, Art, the other favorite character, Art is not, it's a spaceship, sorry. Art is a spaceship, and Art is not Art's real name. Murderbot calls Art Art. I can't remember the spaceship's real name. It doesn't matter, because Art stands for Art stands for Asshole Research Transport? Yeah, Asshole Research Transport. Because Art's kind of an asshole. And Murderbot and Art are kind of best friends, but they also kind of hate each other. and a lot of really, really funny sarcasm and like toxic banter ensues. And it's just, it gives me life. So if you, like, a lot of people might not really appreciate Murderbot because of like the humor in it. It is very like sarcastic and a little bit mean maybe. But for those of us who enjoy that toxic kind of humor, everything in the Murderbot Diary series is amazing. I think I've given every single book in the series so far 5 stars. So I highly recommend it. So that's all the books. As you can probably obviously tell, I think Network Effect should win, right? It's obviously my favorite. What I actually think is going to win is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. Objectively, I think that is the best written book out of all of these, even if I didn't get all of the enjoyment out of it that I should have. So my wish to win is Network Effect. My prediction to win is Black Sun. Let me know in the comments how my predictions went. Did I completely throw this? Am I wrong about any of these books? Keep it polite in the comments if I don't like one of your favorite books. We're allowed to have different tastes, but I would love to hear from you. Anyway, that's it. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.